Hi, boys and girls. It's Easter Sunday. Last week was crazy. Started off on Palm Sunday with a parade, palm branches everywhere, Jesus riding a donkey down the hill. And then he gathered all of his disciples up, and he had this amazing dinner that had been passed down for thousands of years, exactly the way we call it the Seder, or the Passover dinner, where God freed his people and set them out to be his people forever and ever. And then Jesus went to pray. And while he was praying in this Garden of Gethsemane, they came and they arrested him. And they arrested him because Judas, one of the disciples, sold him out for 30 pieces of silver. And they arrested Jesus, and they took him before Pilate and Herod and the chief priests, and they kept screaming, "Crucify him!" And everybody said, "What has he done?" And it didn't matter. They just wanted Jesus gone. And so all night long, they talked about what to do with Jesus. And finally, Pontius Pilate said, "I don't want a riot, so crucify him." And the soldiers took him out, and they nailed him to a cross between two thieves. And, well, Jesus hung on that cross for 6 hours, and then he died. And then a guy named Joseph showed up, Joseph of Arimathea, and he says, "I got a brand new tomb. Nobody's ever used it before. I would be honored to let Jesus be buried in my tomb." And so they quickly ran because it was almost the Sabbath. And at 6 o'clock, they had to be back in their homes. Otherwise, they would be in trouble. And so Jesus, they laid his body out in the tomb, and they rolled the stone in front, and then they ran home. And all day Saturday, it was so long. And all Saturday night. But Jesus had told the disciples, "I have to go to Jerusalem," and he did. "I have to suffer many things," he did. "I have to be crucified," he did. But then he said, "But on the third day, I will rise from the dead." Now, everybody knew the first three were true. He suffered, and he went to Jerusalem, and he died. That was given. But the question is, could they believe that he was also going to rise from the dead? So have you ever heard the phrase, egg on your face? It goes way back, over 100 years, back when they had what was called vaudeville acts. And these were groups of people that went from town to town performing. And if they were really good, they threw money on the stage. But if they were really bad, they threw eggs at them. Yeah, and then they would leave the stage because, by the way, if you've ever dropped an egg, you know, number one, it makes a big mess. And number two, if you don't clean it up, it really stinks. And so that was what they were saying. You stink. Well, Christians say that Jesus rose from the grave. We actually believe that Jesus died and that 3 days later on Sunday morning, he rose again. But if we're not telling the truth, if Jesus didn't rise, then we have egg on our face. St. Paul in the scripture lesson, he says, you know, if all we have in this life is a make-believe Jesus, we're to be pitied more than anybody else. But he says, we aren't to be pitied because we have a Jesus who rose from the dead. You know, here's an egg. And you know what you use eggs for? Yeah, you make omelets and you can make eggs. You can make all sorts of things. And I don't know that I would throw eggs at people. They're too expensive, but I don't want egg on my face because I'd have to really clean it up. But I believe that Jesus rose from the dead. So much so that, oh, boy, it was really good that egg was empty because otherwise I'd have egg on my face. But I don't. You see, Jesus rose from the dead. And so his tomb was empty, just like that egg was empty. You know, when I was in Australia, we got to go to an ostrich farm, and ostriches lay eggs that are almost this big. Yeah, they're not purple. They're kind of an off-white. But they made eggs that are almost this big. And so when I saw, you know, Miss Kayla's egg, and I thought about it, and I thought, wow, can you imagine? Because if you had this much egg on your face, it would be terrible. And I thought, I wonder what happens when I have egg on my face. And so here's what I discovered. You see, when I open this egg, and you know what all these papers say? They say alleluia. The word that we haven't said for 40 days plus all the Sundays. It says alleluia. Big banners. Alleluia, 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 alleluia. We don't have egg on our face. Jesus rose from the dead, and we're going to scream alleluia all for eternity because we have a God who loves us and forgives us, and we get to go live with him in heaven forever. So happy Easter. He is risen. He is risen indeed.